Before we get started on our next great adventure, go into your exercise folder and open up an image that begins with 159. Bunch of buildings. What we're going to talk about in this chapter is a very powerful tool, if used for good and not evil, and we're talking about levels. Levels has been a part of Photoshop, well, since the beginning, and it hasn't really changed. It's a very powerful tool to work with to manipulate photographic data. Now, we can get it in two places. Up here, go to the word image and go down to adjustments. Actually, let me do this first. Let me select a layer. I have found out something. And what I found out in my travels is this. If you try to do something in a program like Photoshop and it's not cooperating with you, it's typically because you didn't do something. It's not that the program is mad at you. So yes, you have to have a layer selected to make that happen. Let's go back up to the word image, go down to adjustments, and there it is. Levels. All right. Now let's go ahead and close it. I have a much better place for you to get this. And what I'm talking about is an adjustment layer. Now, if you've been following through this title from the first chapter, you know already how important adjustment layers are. Let's just concentrate on levels. Let's come down to our half moon icon. We do have that layer selected now. Come down here and click and go to levels. You are looking at the levels adjustments, and we're going to talk about them and how they work. Let's start at the top of properties and work our way down. Now, the first thing we have is options. In options, you have an auto select parameter. What's that? Well, if you select that, if you choose it, that means when you open up levels for the first time, this field will be in focus. You can type in it without having to click. It's up to you. Let's go back up here again. We have save, load, and delete for presets. You come up with something in levels that's absolutely brilliant and you want to save it. Well, of course you can. You've got auto options and clipping options. We'll talk about those in a second. And you have a reset in case you want to start all over again and a close. So let's go ahead and get out of here. Moving down, you have two options to show the mask or to show the properties. Now we're going to stick to properties for now. Here's your presets. You can use those if you want to, but I have found, again, in my travels, that basically presets are nice, but images are fingerprints, and every one is different, and they usually require your own little magic touch to them. But if you want to save your own, you can, and put them right here. We have RGB right here, and red, green, and blue. Now, this is a very important distinction to remember about working in levels. Your default is RGB. When you're working in RGB, you're changing tonal values, lightening and darkening. When you work in an individual channel, you're changing color values. Just depends on what you want to do. You have an auto button. Again, we'll talk about that in a minute. You've got three eyedroppers. Count them. 1, 2, 3. Highlights, midtones, and shadows. When you select one, it allows you to go into the image and sample what you feel would be the darkest, the lightest, and the midtone areas. Sometimes they can save you a whole lot of time. Now let's come over here because this is the important area. That is a histogram. The histogram represents color information within an image based on the brightness of the pixels and the color itself. So I'll tell you what. Select this layer right here. Now let's say I want to apply that levels adjustment to this layer. Drag it up just like that. Now you'll notice the histogram changes because there's not really much over here. So what exactly is going on over there? Look at all these three gradients, actually four. We got a grayscale one at the top, and we got red, green, and blue. It represents the red, green, and blue colors of an image and the brightness or luminosity, the RGB channel or the red, the green, and the blue. When you manipulate these input sliders right here, you are physically changing the image. For example, here's the shadow. Watch what happens up here when I move this one to the right. What I'm doing, if I stop here, I'm telling the computer from this point here all the way back to here, throw those pixels away. This is the new black. Let me go ahead and take that back this way. Same thing here with white. Now the middle slider is for midtones. So it doesn't clip the blacks or the whites. It moves and redistributes the middle. Lightening and darkening. Again, we can click here to reset. Now, what are output levels? Well, the difference between an input level and an output level is when I move these sliders up here, what I'm doing is I'm clipping information. I'm throwing it away to get the image that I want. When I use the output levels, what I'm doing is I'm remapping all of the information. So watch, for example, that black up there when I move this over to the right. I'm not throwing anything away. I'm telling the computer, hey, remember that black over there? Well, that's not a black anymore. That's a middle gray, and remap everything else according to what I just did. You say, well, what value is that to me? Well, I find output levels valuable when I'm doing print. When I'm working with papers that have a high dot gain, and I don't want to give the print a whole lot of ink, I can actually move this down, which might not make the image look that great, but when it prints, it actually looks pretty good. That's one reason you might want to use them. What's this option, Andy? It's a warning. Well, that warning is telling me something. It's saying the histogram that I am looking at is not accurate. You say, well, why wouldn't it be? It's getting its information from a cache. It's kind of like you got a file cabinet. You open it up, and there's a bunch of papers in there, letters. And you pull one out, but it's not the most recent letter. It's close, but it's not the recent one. If you click here, it says, well, it could take me a second to do this. But if you do this, I'll remap, and I'll make it more accurate. So watch over here when I click that button. It took it about a second to do it, but it did remap the image. Now, if we go back here, let's turn this one off. We can leave that right up there. It's telling us the same thing. Every once in a while, you will see that. When you do, stop and click it to get a more accurate reading. Now, it doesn't change what's going on over here, okay? It doesn't change that. What it changes is what you see over here reflecting what's going on over here. So what's going on, again, with that auto button? You said you'd talk about that later. Now is later. If I click auto, you see it changed the image slightly. Now, I am not a big fan of auto. Don't really like it that much because most of the time I want to control the process. However, a lot of people don't like it, mainly because of the fact it just kind of does its own thing. There's no control. Yes, there is. If we come back to the option, auto options control that button. And if you click it, you have a lot of different things that you can change it to. And you can see it's showing you what it's going to do. You can enhance monochromatic contrast. All these three here, these three, give you options down here. If you choose this one, they actually gray out. So let's come back to one of these. Down here, you got shadows, midtones, and highlights. Okay, when you do an auto, it clips 0.10, 1/10 of 1% off the black in the white, and brings those two sliders in toward the middle. That has a tendency to make the image a little bit more contrasty. But maybe with what you're doing, you have a whole batch of images that you figured out what you need to do. You can change it here and then use the auto button and save yourself a bunch of time. Let's go ahead and get out of here for now. Now, what is that other one? You said you'd talk about that later, and that is show clipping for black and white points. What that does, as you're moving the sliders, it will show you what areas are going to be clipped out, which ones are gone. The reason I'm not a big fan of activating it from the options is it's always on. Let me show you a trick here. You're moving this slider to readjust the image. It's getting darker. But what areas are now gone? Hold down while you're still moving it. Hold down the Alt key, and that's the Option key on a Mac, Alt and Windows, and you can see. Those areas that are black are gone forever. We're losing that information. It can show us what we are clipping. Same thing on this side. The white areas are gone forever. Now, again, in the course of working on an image, sometimes that's necessary to make the image look the way you want it to look. But by holding down that key, and that's the Alt key, Option key on a Mac, Alt and Windows, it allows you to see it without using the option up here, which then would always be on. Layers allows me to control the information in an image in either a tonal range situation or a color correction situation. And since we're using an adjustment layer, as you well know, it's totally non-destructive.